Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 11th race for the International GT Open Series in 2018. We're moving towards the closing phase of the championship, and this has been a fantastically competitive series so far. Monza is the venue. We've got just one round left after this one. We head to the Circuit de Catalunya in Barcelona. The first of this weekend's races will be run over 70 minutes and feature, of course, the mandatory driver change in the middle of the race. We've got a packed crowd here to see some fantastic racing machinery in action, and we have a hot track as well. 35-degree track temperature, 27-degree air temperature, so it is a warm one here at Monza. The drivers and cars beginning to make their way out of the pits to perform their final reconnaissance laps and form up on the grid. And then, of course, we'll have the formation lap and the standard rolling start down to the very tight first corner at Monza. It gets very, very narrow as they get down there, and it could be a very interesting run towards the first corner at the start, particularly with this absolutely packed field of 27 cars and some fabulously exotic machinery. We've got Lamborghini Huracans, we've got Ferrari 488s, we've got BMW M6s, we've got Audi R8s, we've got Mercedes SLS AMGs, we've got one Audi, and in a new addition to the championship this weekend, we've also got a Honda NSX run by the Honda Works squad with a couple of their top drivers, Bertrand Baguette and Esteban Guerrieri at the wheels, and they've qualified quite strongly up as well. In 8th position on the grid. So we have got plenty of points of interest in this one. As always, the International GT Open split into 3 different classes. We've got all pro lineups, we've got all amateur lineups, and we've got pro-am lineups as well. And that always produces very, very lively racing. We have the mandatory pit stops in the middle of the race. Those include a certain amount of extra time penalties for the most competitive of the cars to help keep the playing field balanced, and as an alternative to balancing out the performance of the cars, it's balanced through the pit stops, and that always helps produce exciting action as well. The dignitaries are heading out onto the grid, and we're going to get a rundown on the grid shortly as we just see a few of the cars making their way towards the grid. That is one of many of the Lamborghini Huracans in the field making its way around, getting ready for the start of this one. Indeed, there is a fleet of 3 of them from the Imperiale Racing team heading out with the yellow flashes on. That denotes the car number 63, which is Giovanni Venturini, who will be starting this race and then handing over to Jeroen Mull. And we now go on board with one of the Target Racing cars also making its way around. This is Loris Spinelli at the wheel of another Lamborghini Huracan, and his teammate Alberto De Folco will be taking over later on in this one. De Folco, rather, I correct myself. So the Target Racing car heading out around the Curva Grande. And as you can see, absolutely splendid conditions at Monza today. It began very, very close and humid. It's dried out a bit as the day has gone on, but got hotter and hotter with it. And a packed crowd, as I say, here to enjoy today's racing. We go on board in the Honda NSX. Bertrand Baguette will be starting the race in this one. And that gives you a pretty good view of it. And in fact, you can just see it about 5 cars back in this queue, mostly black with a few red flashes. A really racy-looking livery. I really like the style of that one. Although it's fair to say we're not short of great-looking cars in this category. But the addition of the Honda NSX is great to see as well. That is Fabrizio Crestani at the wheel of the Daiko Lazarus Lamborghini Huracan, one of 2 of their entries in this race. His teammate Miguel Ramos will take over later on in proceedings. And Crestani had a pretty good run in qualifying and will be starting fairly well up in 10th position on the 5th row of the grid. Now, we've not got most of the cars in place just yet. The cars are all going to be starting to fill up. There's just one Audi R8 in the field, and there it is. Oliver Wilkinson at the wheel of that one for Optimum Motorsport, and we'll hand over to Bradley Ellis later on in proceedings. But as you see, a wealth of different GT cars in the International GT Open, a real good mix of entries, different body shapes, different engine configurations, and does tend to lend to particularly exciting racing. as the mix of driver abilities, of course, at this level of racing often does as well. There's Damiano Fioravanti for Ombra Racing in their Lamborghini Huracan, getting ready to start. And our pole sitter, Daniele Diamato, for RS Racing in their Ferrari 488, nabbing pole position by just 0.005 of a second from the Lamborghini Huracan of Imperiale Racing, piloted by Giovanni Venturini in this morning's qualifying session. It was a super exciting one. Really, those were the only two drivers in contention for outright pole position. The rest of the field about 4 to 5 tenths of a second, or at least the closest of them, 4 to 5 tenths of a second behind. It was all about Diamato and Venturini swapping fastest lap times, and Diamato, it was very narrowly claiming honours. Jiatong Liang just ahead in the Imperiale Racing Lamborghini Huracan, one of them, as our pole sitter motors his way past the grid to take up his position on the front slot. That must be a fantastic feeling for any racing driver, to go past all the cars that you don't need to overtake at the start of the race to claim a rightful spot. And of course, where better to have a Ferrari on pole position than at Monza. And of course, Diamato on the inside of the track to claim the pole sitters advantage as they go down towards the Rettifilio when we get this race started by a rolling start in just a few minutes' time. The fans taking the opportunity to get pictures of some spectacular racing machinery in a real kaleidoscope of colours. Lime green, a particular favourite, but lots and lots of other ones out there as well. There is Venturini on the right-hand side of your grid, and wow, what an absolutely packed field we've got. Lots and lots of people taking an opportunity to get close up to the cars in the dying minutes before the race begins. I always think that must put such pressure on the drivers and mechanics to have everybody milling around them just minutes before we are ready to start the race with their selfie sticks and all the rest of it. There is Daniele Diamato at the office, getting ready to go. Let's take a look back then at how pole position was decided. And as we mentioned, it was a super close battle between Daniele Diamato and Giovanni Venturini. Diamato led the way early on in the proceedings with a 1:47.629, but just kept chipping away at his lap time, and at one stage had about half a second on the entire field until Venturini made a big improvement. Diamato getting a little bit greedy with the curbs at the Rettifilio on occasion. Those big sausage curbs on the inside of the corner can really disturb the car. But nonetheless, one of his clean laps, he took pole, and here's what he had to say.
Magnificent pole, 0.005 of a second, really mere gap.
Really happy for this job. Something special to be here in Monza in a home race. Was a difficult job for the last races, but we had a good setup for the race, and we tried something more on the car, and what a lap! Very happy. Thanks to the team RS Racing and all my sponsor. Thank you so much.
Well, as far as the championship is concerned, Daniele Diamato comes in 6th position. With 55 points, and his teammate Andrea Montemini a few places back on 50. They've had a single win so far, and that was, my apologies, sorry, they've had a single win so far, the second race at Paul Ricard, but the wins have been shared between 6 different car and driver combinations so far this series. It's been a particularly competitive championship. Championship leader Michael Mack has had 3 wins with his teammate Alessandro Pierguidi, but hasn't won in any of the last 5 races. In fact, after winning in 3 of the first 5 races, hasn't won since. That gives you an indication of how competitive this championship is. Here is Riccardo Agostini in the second of the Imperiale Racing Lamborghini Huracans in 3rd on the grid. So we've got a Ferrari on pole, and then a couple of the Imperiale Lamborghinis right behind, ready for the start of the race. 4th place on the grid, Damiano Fioravanti for Ombra Racing in their car on the 2nd row. as we continue our run down the grid. As we say, the cars in all manner of different shapes and sizes, and the BMW M6 characteristically very different to the 4 cars in front of it, but that's part of what makes this championship so intriguing. Lourenco Barrio de Vega will start in their car before handing over to Juan Cruz Alvarez in the Teo Martin team. 6th place on the grid, and winners last time out, Tom Onslow Cole will start the race and then hand over to Valentin Peerberg in their Mercedes SLS AMG car, which is run by SPS Automotive. Loris Spinelli for Target Racing is behind him. And Spinelli's teammate Alberto De Falco will take over in their Target Racing Lamborghini Huracan when they come into the pits. There is the new car that everyone is talking about, new at least to this series and making one of its first appearances in Europe, the Honda NSX, with Bertrand Baguette, the Formula Renault 3.5 champion of a few years back at the wheel. He'll hand over to crack Honda touring car driver Esteban Guerrieri later on. Let's run down the full grid with Daniele Diamato on pole position for the Ferrari. A couple, in fact a trio of Lamborghinis behind him. Riccardo Agostini and Damiano Fioravanti will be starting the race on row 2. Lourenco Barrio de Vega 5th for Teo Martin in their BMW, followed by SLS Automotive's Tom Onslow Cole in their Mercedes. Loris Spinelli will start alongside newcomer to the series, Bertrand Baguette, on row 4. Let's see how the Honda NSX performs over the race. Eddie Cheever, the son of Formula 1 driver Eddie Cheever, will start from 9th place in his Ferrari run by Luzic Racing. Fabrizio Crestani behind him. Michael Mack, the Drivers' Championship leader, only in 11th place, ahead of Andres Saravia in their BMW. Kangling starts from 13th place alongside Dominic Schweger in the Rinaldi Racing Ferrari 488. Toby Sarari is next up for Daiko Lazarus in their Lamborghini Huracan. The next row is Stefano Costatini and Jiatong Liang, who had a bit of an off in practice, and Alan Hellmeister had an even worse off in qualifying. In fact, bent his Mercedes and brought out the red flag for a couple of minutes during qualifying today. Further back, Alexander West and Ricardo Baptista shared the 12th row of the grid, and then it's Mario Placiuta and Marcio Bassa, followed by Alexander Hrachowina last on the grid. Well, here's a little look back at what happened last time out at Silverstone. The SLS Automotive Mercedes really had the conquering of the Northamptonshire track, and Tom Onslow Cole and Valentin Peerberg taking the honours in this race. And as usual, plenty of action going on behind them, and a bit of contact as well in the loop involving one of the Ferraris. And also the Teo Martin BMW of Lourenco Barrio de Vega and Juan Cruz Alvarez helped into a spin as well. But Peerberg and Onslow Cole kept well ahead of all the mess and duly picked up the victory. In the other race, it was Marco Ciocci and Daniel Serra to the fore in their Ferrari 488. They ran away with that one. But more close action behind them as well, in particular involving the Damiano Fioravanti and Stefano Gattuso Lamborghini scrapping away with the Luzic Racing run Ferrari. And so it was Marco Ciocci and Daniel Serra taking that victory at Silverstone. So let's take a look at the leaderboard heading into today's race, as the crowd get ready for the 11th race of the 2018 GT Open. The drivers are forming up on their formation lap. As you can see, they're already out of the second Lesmo, so we're not very far away from getting this one underway. Behind the safety car, we have Daniele Diamato in the Ferrari 488 for RS Racing, and then a trio of Lamborghini Huracans close behind, 2 of them from Imperiale Racing. And then Ombro Racing's Damiano Fioravanti in 4th place. Next up will be Loris Spinelli in the BMW. sorry, next up is Tom Onzelko in the Mercedes, followed by Loris Spinelli in the BMW, and then Bertrand Baguette in 8th position. But it is all at first going to be about that sprint down to the tight first chicane. And as we were saying, these are very big, fast, wide, especially cars. And the track gets quite narrow as we come down towards turn 1. So the drivers are going to have to be on their very, very best behavior not to have any kind of incidents down into turn 1 the first time by. But they will be forming up as the teams look on from the garages as the cars head towards the Parabolica, and that is a splendid sight to see. 27 high-performance GT cars getting ready for 70 minutes of racing at the fastest and the most exciting circuit in Europe. The field come out of the final corner. Daniele Di Amato leads them to the start-finish line. The safety car is in. We're getting ready to start racing at Monza. The red lights are showing, and when will they be glowing? Now they are out. Daniele Di Amato leads away, but he's got the 2 Lamborghinis very, very close up behind him. One of the Teo Martin BMWs has hit trouble already and is slowing on the apron as they approach the corner, and trying to get around the outside is Giovanni Venturini. There's a bit of contact and a few cars off in the background, and tapped into a spin goes Riccardo Agostini as half of the field bumps across the inside of the chicane. There really wasn't enough room for all of them there, but Di Amato has kept his lead. Venturini is up into 2nd place, and we're just going to have to see how the rest of them have worked their way out of that first corner, what kind of order they're in as they come down towards the Variante della Roja for the first time. Damiano Fioravanti is still in 3rd place. Tom Onzelko, though, has moved up to 4th in the Mercedes, so it's been a decent start to the race for him. Or has it? Because now he's getting hung out to dry on the outside of Lesmo 1, so perhaps something's gone wrong there. And a very forceful start from Bertrand Baguette in the Honda. He's up to 5th place, and Onzelko has lost another position to Loris Spinelli, I believe that is, who's moved ahead. Sure enough, he has. So it's Daniele Di Amato as they come down towards the Ascari chicane for the first time. Giovanni Venturini slots in behind, and then it's Damiano Fioravanti. Bertrand Baguette is 4th, having made a very good start indeed in the Honda, making up 4 places. Loris Spinelli is next in the Target Racing Lamborghini Huracan. And a couple of drivers running a little bit wide at the exit of Ascari and kicking up some dust. But as the cars settle into their order now at the start of the race, we wait to see who, if any of them, may have hit trouble. It was Lorenzo Barreo de Vega in the Teo Martin BMW M6 that we saw going slowly and had dropped back. And I think despite all the contact and all the other incidents we saw around that first lap, the rest of the field are still going. So lap 1 is over, and it is Daniele Di Amato with a comfortable little lead over Giovanni Venturini. A second to the good at the end of lap 1 is decent going. Damiano Fioravanti running a little bit deep at the Rettifilio as we begin lap 2. Bertrand Baguette will be looking to close in the Honda, which certainly went well over a single lap, but we wait to see how quick that car is over a race distance. Loris Spinelli next in 5th, followed by Tom Onzelko in the Mercedes. Then, kicking up a little bit of dust. I think that was our race leader, in fact, Di Amato, causing that one. But most of the cars fairly single file at this stage. It's a decent length race, this one. It's an hour and 10 minutes in total. So normally, the way these unfold is the drivers sort of play themselves in the opening stint of the race. And it's when we start to get around the pit stops and the drivers start to come out in varied orders and have to work their way through traffic that the outcome of the race is usually decided. Now, as we said, problem for Lorenzo Barreo de Vega, and he hits the pits in his Teo Martin run car, so a big setback for him. Meanwhile, the rest of the field still in fairly good order. Most of them running with their lights on, despite the fact that it's daytime, but nonetheless, pressing on, and it's such a long and quick lap around here. It's rare to come across a circuit where the drivers are able to run at such high speeds, almost without interruption, for such a long amount of time. There's really only the first chicane, which really slows them down very much indeed. The rest of the track is pretty quick indeed, and this is where they build up to their highest speeds of all, pushing well over 270 kilometers an hour before they get onto the brakes for this corner. The Rettifilio chicane, the very sharp right-hander, and then the even sharper left-hander. And I think Onslow Cole in the Mercedes has not given up hopes of getting past Loris Spinelli ahead of him just yet. He is looking a little bit racy. And unsurprisingly, it's D'Amato who sets the fastest lap on the first full lap of action, ahead of Venturini. The rest of the field just following order for the time being behind them. There's a couple of cars that are closer together further back. Tom Onslow Cole and Loris Spinelli are two of them, and then Fabrizio Crestani has got his mirrors filled by Andrus Saravia. And Crestani, after that decent run in qualifying, holding on to 7th place at the moment, so he has in fact made up a little bit of ground. We're just trying to see what else has happened. And Mikael Mack, I can't help but notice, our championship leader, has slipped down into 14th place. Hadn't had a particularly good qualifying session in the Ferrari, but had qualified 11th, but has lost another 3 places at the start. So that, it has to be said, is a bit of a surprise that the Luzic Racing car isn't running further up. As we get a replay of the start, and doesn't really show an awful lot of what may have happened to the Teo Martin BMW of De Vega. And meanwhile, down at the chicane, well, an awful lot of drivers having to take the short route. And look at that, Loris Spinelli braking way too late at the first corner, and that was what tipped the Imperiale Racing Lamborghini into a spin. And that was Riccardo Agostini, really blameless in that incident there. When he was hit from behind by Spinelli. There's no indication at the moment as to whether that one is being investigated. But Agostini having to get going again from the back. Has already made his way up into 20th position and is lapping quite a bit quicker than the cars immediately in front of him. So Agostini down in 20th in the Imperiale Racing Lamborghini Huracan is making good progress through the rest of the field. So perhaps the day not completely done for them. We go on board with Jiatong Liang in another of the Lamborghini Huracans, currently running in 19th place. So in fact, Liang has got Agostini pretty close behind. Are we going to see Agostini springing an attack on us fairly soon? Well, at the moment, Liang is pursuing Rinat Salikov in another of the Ferrari 488s run by Rinaldi Racing. And as we switch to the external shot, you can see just how much Agostini is pressuring, and knocked into a spin. That was Andrzej Lewandowski pointing the wrong way down at the Rettifilio after being attacked by behind, so a setback for the Vincenzo Sospiri Racing driver. Meanwhile, up at the sharp end, Daniele D'Amato is pulling well clear, 1.8 seconds ahead now of Giovanni Venturini and Damiano Fioravanti, 1.9 seconds behind them. Bertrand Baguette, though, closing on our lead trio. The Honda, in fact, taking, well, actually only about 0.3 of a second out of Fioravanti the last time round. And we've got a spinner off into the gravel trap and an early end to the race, it looks like, for Oliver Wilkinson in the Audi R8 run by Optimum Motorsport. We've got a yellow flag down where he's gone off. It looks like a Scari where the car is beached in the gravel. Now, it remains to be seen if we're going to need a safety car for that one. Meanwhile, we have indeed got a safety car, sure enough. It did look as though it was going to be necessary for that incident involving the Audi. Of course, the big question is, did he jump or was he pushed? Was there anybody else involved in that one? A bit of damage on the front of Kang Ling's car, the Vincenzo Sospiri Racing Lamborghini Huracan. And I wonder actually if it was Kang Ling who was involved in that incident a moment ago, or whether both of Vincenzo Sospiri's drivers has hit trouble in the past few laps. Here is at least the end of what happened to Oliver Wilkinson in the Audi. It's not quite clear exactly what triggered that, and it doesn't look as though he's been able to restart, so that could be an end to the day for them. And pretty hefty damage on the front of that car, and we haven't seen exactly what might have triggered that. Meanwhile, Rinat Salikov for the Rinaldi Racing Ferrari team is in the pits and up on the jacks. We shall see why shortly, but the recovery vehicle is on the track to pull Oliver Wilkinson's car away, and so with this just being recovering one car, it will hopefully not mean too long a safety car interruption. It does mean, however, that the near 2-second lead that Daniele Di Amato had built up over Giovanni Venturini has gone. And the same is true in respect of Venturini's similar size margin over Bertrand Baguette. Venturini's gap over Fioravanti. Fioravanti didn't have much of a lead over Bertrand Baguette. They were both pretty close. We go on board with the Honda NSX under the safety car. And so Baguette just sort of working the car from side to side to help to keep a little bit of heat in the tyres. The team manager of car 41 has been asked to report to race control. That is Ricardo Baptista's car. He is in the DriveX Mercedes SLS AMG. So I wonder if he was involved in an incident we haven't seen. Was he perhaps involved in the incident that put Oliver Wilkinson out of the race? We may see a bit more on that shortly. But still a full hour of racing to go. So really the safety car is going to be in fairly soon. And then the drivers, I suspect, will have a bit of time, a decent bit of time before the pit stops begin to build up a lead at the sharp end. And for the time being, all they can really do is be patient. Let's just take a little bit of a look at the running order then. Behind Baguette in 4th place, we've got Loris Spinelli is next up in the Target Racing Lamborghini Huracan, followed by Tom Onslow Cole in the Mercedes SLS run by HTB Motorsport and MS Racing. And the safety car is in fact coming in this lap. So once again, as we've seen previously, very quick work indeed by the Monza marshals to ensure minimum disruption by getting that car out of the way quickly. So we're going to be back up racing again very soon. Just to complete the top 10, we've got Fabrizio Crestani in 7th position. Crestani at the wheel of another of the Lamborghini Huracans, that one by Daiko Lazarus. And Andres Saravia is next in the Teo Martin BMW M6, followed by Toby Sowery and another of the Daiko Lazarus Lamborghini Huracans. And then rounding off the top 10 at the moment, Dominic Schweger for Rinaldi Racing in the bright green Ferrari 488. Just outside the top 10 at the moment in their first race weekend, Eddie Cheever alongside Nicholas Nielsen, who'll be handing over to later in the race, and another of the Luzic Racing Ferraris. But Daniele Di Amato is ready and has dropped already the hammer, trying to get a gap over Giovanni Venturini, and I think Di Amato has done that absolutely perfectly. Look at that. He's got quite a few car lengths on Venturini as he brings the field around the Parabolica to get this race restarted. Venturini has got a little gap over Fioravanti, but then Bertrand Baguette and Loris Spinelli very, very close behind, and Onslow Cole in turn has got Crestani trying to get down the inside of him. Crestani's made a very good restart indeed and could punish Onslow Cole as they come down towards the Rettifilio. Bertrand Baguette looking a little bit racy in that Honda as well. Not able to make a move just yet, but ducking off into the runoff area goes Loris Spinelli. Meanwhile, Crestani has got the pass completed on Tom Onslow Cole. And I think Crestani could lose out. Sorry, I think that Spinelli could be the one to lose out here in a moment. We will see whether that turns out to be the case or not, but nonetheless, already some changes of position following the safety car period, and I think another one a little bit further back. Now that's Fioravanti and Bertrand Gachot very, very close indeed. Spinelli right behind them, so those top three very close indeed, but Crestani has indeed moved up another place, as has Tom Onslow Cole, at the expense of the BMW, which we saw losing a place. It was Andres Saravia who went straight on at the Rettifilio and has lost 2 places as a result of it, or at least surrendered 2 places that he couldn't hold on to as a result of that. But Bertrand Gachot pushing hard on the back of Fioravanti, trying to find a way by. And Baguette, for my money, able to hold a little bit of a tighter line around the fast right-hand part of Ascari as he tries to get a run. We go on board. Is Fioravanti going to have to cover off the inside line as they come into the Parabolica? The Honda driver just has a little bit of a look. But Fioravanti, wise to the move, unwilling to be dragged away from the racing line, because of course once you start defending, that begins compromising your lap times, and that just makes the job even harder. But he may not have an option, because that Honda does seem to have some decent pace and is closing right up on the tail of the Lamborghini. And Fioravanti delaying his move over to the left-hand side of the track to get onto the optimum braking line for the chicane. Baguette thinks better of a move for the time being. Oh, and all over the curbs on the inside of the hairpin was Dominic Schweger that time around. And we have another driver slipping back there. That is Eddie Cheever. I think it's getting pounced on by a couple of his rivals. I think actually it's possible Cheever might be surrendering some places after cutting the chicane there. It's a little bit tricky to see at the moment. But D'Amato has restored his 1 second advantage over Venturini, who in turn has 2.6 seconds of the good over Fioravanti, because Fioravanti is having to defend so hard against Bertrand Baguette now. I think we saw that happening as we came into the chicane the last time by. But slowing is Venturini from second place. Now, is this an off or is this some kind of problem? Because it looks as though he's getting back up to speed. So having lost second, third and fourth places and fifth place as well, but Venturini may in fact be back up to speed, but we didn't see what went wrong there. We might get a chance to see in a moment. We've had a warning for Eddie Cheever for cutting the track. But what happened to Venturini? Because look at the lead that D'Amato has got. Now that the guy who was in second place has dropped out of proceedings, D'Amato is 4 seconds to the good at the front of the field, so has got in fact a far bigger advantage than he enjoyed before the safety car came out, so that's worked out nicely indeed for him. There goes Toby Sowery in the Dico Lazarus Lamborghini Huracan, holding off Saravia. So Saravia has lost another place there. I think we go back on board with Baguette again, but he's not as close to Fioravanti this time around. So they all filter into the chicane once more, and there goes Sowery up the inside of Saravia. Saravia has to cut the chicane, which I think he's done at least once already anyway. And he does filter back on in front of Sowery, but he's going to have to give that position up, I'm pretty sure. And we've got some side-by racing further back. Dominic Schweger on the inside of the Curva Grande, but trying to sweep around the outside is that Mikael Mack. Trying to make up a position, and Saravia has not given that position to Toby Sowery, which I think is going to prove to be a mistake, because he clearly gained it by cutting across the chicane. So I think the stewards may get involved in that one if Saravia doesn't hand the position back. It was Mikael Mack going wheel to wheel with Eddie Cheever, but he's not been able to make the position up just yet. But that is a fight between teammates, because both are driving for the Lusic Racing team, and Mikael Mack will be very eager to get ahead and increase his chances of adding to his points tally. So there is our race leader, Daniele D'Amato. Fioravanti in second place, in fact, has broken the charge of Bertrand Baguette, who was tucked up very close behind him for several laps, but has now slipped about 0.8 of a second behind, so the gap's opening up once again. Spinelli fourth, Crestani fifth, Venturini down to sixth after that mystery problem in the Lamborghini, which we haven't seen the details of just yet. And Tom Onslow-Cole then in seventh place ahead of Saravia. Toby Sowery ninth ahead of Eddie Cheever. Here they come. And Saravia still holding on to that potentially ill-gotten eighth place. Sowery ninth, Cheever is 10th, and the safety car is on the track. We've not seen why at the moment, but the safety car has been deployed, and that will be why. We have got another of the Lusic Ferraris in trouble, and that is Alexander West. So our second safety car period of the day. That is bad news for Damiano Fioravanti. Sorry, bad news for Daniele D'Amato, who had a decent lead and has now lost it. And it's bad news also. Oh, and in fact, Alexander West was involved in a collision with another of the Lamborghinis, and that was Andrzej Lewandowski, who we saw in trouble earlier on in the race. So as we were saying, bad news for D'Amato because he loses his lead, And bad news, I would say, also for Michele Rugolo, who was due to take over from Alexander West at the wheel of that car. So for the second time in less than 20 minutes, we have got the safety car out at Monza as we have one of the cars being recovered. So there goes D'Amato's 4.1 second lead over Damiano Fioravanti. And once again, the incident has happened down at Ascari. We've had a few, we haven't seen yet that the first incident that took Oliver Wilkinson out of the race may have been involved with another driver in that one, but we haven't seen yet. This certainly was a coming together between two drivers. So D'Amato, well, he's lost his lead, but as we saw the last time around, he does know how to do a safety car restart around here. But of course, the key to doing a good safety car restart, or multiple safety car restarts, is to not use the same tactics over and over again. Obviously, you know, as the race leader, you've got to, when the safety car comes in, let the safety car head back to the pits and make sure that when you accelerate, you don't accelerate so early that you catch and overtake the safety car before the safety car goes into the pits, because that is an instant penalty if you do. So you've got to pick the right moment to accelerate, but equally, you've got to pick a moment that your rivals are not expecting. And that means you can't just go at the same time each time, or at least it's not a good idea to. You need to mix things up a little bit. And I wonder what D'Amato is going to have up his sleeve for the next safety car restart. Of course, the difference this time is also that the driver right behind D'Amato is not Giovanni Venturini, it is Damiano Fioravanti. So he won't necessarily have seen D'Amato's tactics at close quarters. But if the previous, well, there we have it. I was just about to say, if the previous safety car period is anything to go by, it won't last very long. And sure enough, the Monza Marshals have done us very well again in the International GT Open. The car's cleared out of the way. We are about to get up and running again at the end of this lap. After what you have to say, minimal possible disruption from the safety car, which is always what we like to see, because safety car periods, they do have the attractive quality of bunching the field up, but equally, we don't like to see the drivers running around behind the safety car for lap after lap after lap after lap. It does get a little bit tedious. But no such problems here. They've absolutely kept that one to a minimum, so well done by all concerned. And so, as we were just saying, what does Daniele D'Amato do now? What can he do to surprise Damiano Fioravanti behind him in that Lamborghini and keep him from getting a run down to the Rettifidio? Because of course it's so crucial here at Monza, because the slipstream is so powerful. And has D'Amato gone already? It looks as though he may have put his foot down. Of course, you can't accelerate really hard and then start braking all over the place, but it did look as though he was getting on with it quite quickly. Has he gone for a super early restart? We'll find out in a moment. No, he has backed up the field again. So it's only going to be a fairly short run. We go on board with Bertrand Baguette. This could give us a fascinating view of what the restart is going to be like, as D'Amato stops, weaving from side to side, puts his foot down, trying to catch Fioravanti out. And I think he's pretty much done so. Baguette behind has got a decent little run, and as has Loris Spinelli behind him. So we'll see. It appears to be all about the battle for second place as the race resumes, with 47 minutes left on the clock. So there goes D'Amato by with a 0.6 of a second lead, and Baguette is pressuring very slightly Damiano Fioravanti. And the Honda driver slotting in behind for the time being, ahead of Loris Spinelli, and then it's Fabrizio Crestani, Giovanni Venturini and Tom Onslow Cole, and the drivers duck and weave their way through the Rettifidio for the most part, but someone pulling off in the background. That looks like another Lamborghini, and is that Venturini, who we saw had the problem earlier on? And Venturini's problem struck after a safety car period as well. So perhaps those two things are related. Sure enough, it is. And what has gone wrong for the Imperiale Racing Lamborghini Huracan of Giovanni Venturini? We saw he had a problem not long after the first safety car period, and immediately after the second safety car period, he pulls off and stops. And is there something about running at slow speeds for a prolonged time that has brought that problem on? And he has been able to get going again, albeit very slowly indeed. We briefly saw a shot of Miguel Ramos back in the pits, the teammate of car number 27, or sorry, teammate of Fabrizio Crestani in car number 27, currently holding on to 5th position. And we shall see in a moment. But anyway, D'Amato still has a lead of the best part of a second over Damiano Fioravanti. And there it is, and Baguette slipping a little bit back further behind, and once again, the safety car having gone in, the field is stretching out a little bit, but a driver who has made progress is Mikael Mack, who has overtaken Eddie Cheever and is now up into 9th place. And Venturini again is absolutely crawling and pulls over into a gravel trap. Is he going to be able to be retrieved from there, or are we going to need another safety car now? But it certainly looked like he'd lost any possible further drive, and maybe that was his only option to get off the circuit. Nonetheless, cars racing at the moment. Sure enough, I'm afraid the safety car is deployed for the 3rd time in the opening phase of this race, so that Giovanni Venturini's Lamborghini can be recovered from the gravel trap. You can just see the beginning of in shot here. Well, that is unfortunate indeed, and it really has played havoc with this opening stint for the drivers. We go on board with Bertrand Baguette, who, like the other drivers who started the opening phase of this race, has not had a terrific amount in the way of racing to do in terms of getting his elbows out, because we've spent rather a lot of it behind the safety car. Anyway, I was in the process of saying that Mikael Mack had made his way up into 9th place, which is starting to look like a bit of a recovery performance for him, because Mack had started from 11th place and slipped back to 14th at the start, but has now made up a few places. And of course, having gained 1 place from Giovanni Venturini hitting trouble, he has also managed to overtake the sister Luzic Racing Ferrari of Eddie Cheever as he moves up into 9th position. His next target will be Toby Sowery in the Dyco Lazarus Racing Lamborghini Huracan. And you can see there in the long shot in the field, Mack is the red Ferrari with the white nose, the leading of those two similar-looking Ferraris. As Venturini is being pulled out of the gravel trap at turn 3 now. And hopefully they will be able to complete that during this single safety car lap, and get us back going again as swiftly as they did with the previous 2 safety car periods. So behind Mikael Mack is Eddie Cheever. Let's just take a little bit of an overview of the field. We've got D'Amato leading outright, ahead of Damiano Fioravanti, and D'Amato's going to have to come up with something cunning again at the next restart to ensure he keeps his rival behind. 5th place at the moment is Fabrizio Crestani. Crestani is leading the Pro-Am category in his Dyco Lazarus Lamborghini Huracan. In 5th, as we say, overall, but right behind him is 2nd place in that class, Tom Onslow Cole, whose Mercedes SLS AMG won outright last time out at Silverstone. So definitely a battle there to keep an eye on. And leading the amateur class at the moment is Zdeno Michalasko. Michalasko driving an ARC Bratislava Lamborghini Huracan. And Michalasko is 13th outright at the moment, and he too has his closest class rival immediately behind him on the track. That is the Target Racing Lamborghini Huracan, driven by Stefano Costatini at the moment, who will be handing over to Bernard Delez. When we get to the pit stops, which are going to be coming up fairly soon, because we're coming towards the end of the first half hour of racing at Monza. And after that, we will start to see the drivers coming into the pits fairly soon afterwards. Well, once again, I doff my metaphorical cap to the Monza Marshals, because they have towed Venturini's car away quickly enough that we are able to get the race going again. The safety car is coming in this lap. The safety car about to turn its lights off. And that will shortly put the field back under the control of Daniele D'Amato. And if nothing else, D'Amato has had plenty of opportunities to practice his safety car restarts in this race. But will any of the cars behind him be able to do a better job of putting him under pressure into the first corner? So D'Amato once again weaving those front tyres, trying to keep the temperature up, trying to keep a bit of heat in the brakes, and then waiting until the last possible moment before straightening up and gunning the Ferrari engine towards the Parabolica. And what a thrill that must be for any racing driver. And Fioravanti the gap between the pair of them opens up to a few car lengths, and Fioravanti goes in quite deep actually at the Parabolica, as we see from onboard Bertrand Baguette's car. And will that give Baguette a bit of a run down as they come towards the Rettifilio chicane as we start the 15th lap of the race? We will find out shortly. And sure enough, Baguette does show the nose to Fioravanti as they come down into the chicane, but not able to do anything about him this time around. We are getting ready for the driver changes. We might see the first drivers coming in, and sure enough, here is Nicolas Costa coming in at the wheel of the Lamborghini that is run by sorry, I've got those ones confused. Sorry, that was Nicolas Costa, and then another of the Mercedes we saw heading into the pits. So the drivers taking advantage of the opportunity to change over at the end of the safety car period. That could be quite a cunning move from a strategic point of view, because generally after a safety car period, when you've had the field bundled up, you then see a lot of spread out because people hold each other up a little bit, the gaps open up between them. If you've come into the pits, made your driver change at that time, and then come out into fresh, clean air, you could potentially save yourself a few seconds and gain an advantage that way. So that could be some smart tactics by the field drivers towards the tail end of the field to take advantage of that. We will see which one of them it works out for later on in the race. So that was Nicolas Costa from Vincenzo Sospiri handing over to his teammate Kang Ling. They will now drop towards the tail of the field. They were running higher up earlier on, but we'll see how that does for them as we get an action replay of a move for position coming down into the Variante della Roggia, down the inside on the brakes. That was a nice move indeed for Andrzej Lewandowski for Vincenzo Sospiri Racing. Making his way past Jiatong Liang in the Imperiale Racing run Lamborghini Huracan. Now into the pits comes Alessandro Pierguidi. Sorry, Michael Mack came into the pits to hand over to Alessandro Pierguidi. The timing screen updating so quickly, it completely caught me off there, but that was Michael Mack hitting his marks in the pit boxes. Baguette goes to the outside of Fioravanti, still trying to get this move made on the track. Fioravanti stays defensive, but that could give Baguette a nice run out of that corner. Jiatong Liang hands over another of the Imperiale Racing Lamborghinis to teammate Raffaele Gianmaria. And once again, as Baguette is able to put pressure on Fioravanti, that gives D'Amato the opportunity to re-establish some of the lead over his rivals that he had before the safety car came out, but it was up to north of 4 seconds at one stage. It's just 1.6 at the moment, although I think it's opened out a little bit more than that over the course of this lap. So Fioravanti in second, ahead of Baguette and then Spinelli. Riccardo Baptista hands his car over to Duarte Felix da Costa. Another driver change going on. This is the Mercedes SLS AMG. Alexander Hrachwina handing over to Martin Conrad. And as you can see, no one touching the car at that point. That is because a minimum pit stop time is imposed on these cars, and the length of that time can vary from car to car in order to achieve some equivalence between the performance of the cars. As I think we have a couple of the race leaders heading in. Indeed we do, both the race leaders in fact heading in. Damiano Fioravanti and Daniele D'Amato both heading in. Here is D'Amato to hand over to Andrea Montemini. And you can see in the graphic on the bottom of the screen there what the handicap is for each driver in terms of how long they have to be stationary for. So Fioravanti having to stop for 10 seconds longer while handing over to teammate Stefano Gattuso. So that's going to expand the gap between the two cars that were leading the race originally. Riccardo Agostini also in to swap the seat of his car. Marco Basso hands over to Guillaume Salas in another of the Teo Martin BMWs. While this goes on, Bertrand Baguette has got some clean air at the front of the field, the restart after the first safety car period is under investigation. As we've already had 3 safety car periods, forgive me, my memory is a tad hazy as to exactly what happened that time around. But I can tell you that Daniele Di Amato would have been leading, and I don't remember seeing him doing anything untoward, but of course there were plenty of other cars behind him which could have been involved in something. But Bertrand Baguette, as we say, leading. Now, how long are the JAS Honda Racing Team going to leave him out there before choosing to hand over to teammate Guerrieri? Out comes Andrea Montemini in the car that was leading the race, having taken over it. And we'll see now if these are our actual race leaders, if you like. Bertrand Baguette with a margin over Loris Spinelli of about just under 9/10 of a second. Now, who is going to peel off and head towards the pits on this lap? Again, we've got a couple more coming in. Baguette stays out, but I think Spinelli is among those who has come in, and so has Toby Sowery. So Fabrizio Crestani moves up to second, ahead of Tom Onslow Cole for now at least. So Loris Spinelli hits the pits in his Target Racing Lamborghini Huracan to hand over to teammate Alberto De Falco. And as you can see there, another of the cars with the longer handicap time, so they're going to lose a bit more relative to their rivals. But of course the handicap times are all influenced by the performance of the cars, the performance of the drivers, and what we've seen of them over the years so far. And the idea is it produces a closer race in the end, as Alexander West hands his Luzic Racing Ferrari over to Michele Rugolo. So West was able to get out of that gravel trap and continue. Meanwhile, we have got an on-track battle for second place, as Fabrizio Crestani is coming under attack from Tom Onslow Cole. And then just behind them, Eddie Cheever the third, son of F1 driver and Indianapolis 500 winner of the same name. And a lengthy stop in the pits as Giuseppe Cipriani takes over from the in the Lamborghini Huracan, run by Daco Lazarus of Toby Sowery. And meanwhile, their teammates are second on the road at the moment, and have shaken off that bit of attention from the Onslow Cole Mercedes behind them. And then it is Eddie Cheever in another of the Luzic Ferraris in fourth place. Dominic Schweger is next in fifth position in the Rinaldi Racing Ferrari 488. But more and more of these drivers are heading towards the pits now. We've got another of the leaders coming in, and this time it is the Honda of Bertrand Baguette. So Esteban Guerrieri will be out on track in a moment. And this car in its first race has been given an 85-second handicap based on what's been seen of its performance so far. So we'll see where they filter out as well. Leading among the drivers who've made their pit stops so far. It's always a little bit difficult to judge exactly who has come out where, but it looks like the Teo Martin BMW M6 of Andres Saravia and Fran Rueda is leading of those who've pitted so far. And here is one of their teammates changing hands. This is the car we saw hit trouble at the start of the race. Lorenzo Barreo de Vega handing over to Juan Cruz Alvarez. And sure enough, there is Fran Rueda now in the effective lead of the race, or are they? Because we're still waiting to see exactly where the Honda filters out. But with the longer stationary time for the Honda, I tend to think that they're going to come out behind this battle. We will find out very soon indeed. But here comes Fran Rueda, having taken over from teammate Andres Saravia. Of course, this was the car that we saw cutting the chicane earlier on in the race and potentially gaining a position, so there could be something to come there as well. The Honda hasn't made it out of the pits before these drivers have, so it is Teo Martin and Fran Rueda who lead, at least among those who have pitted, and there are still 8 drivers yet to pit. They include Fabrizio Crestani, Tom Onslow Cole, Eddie Cheever, Dominic Schweger, Zdeno Michelasco, Stefano Costatini, Alan Hellmeister, and Andrzej Lewandowski. There is Esteban Guerrieri now at the wheel of the Honda. And we're going to get a read on his position in the order, having come into the pits. But we've got battles going on 2 distinct parts of the track now, because having had all those safety car periods, it meant the field never really spread out all that much before the pit stop action began. So we kind of bifurcated the race, as it were. Fabrizio Crestani hits the pits and will be stationary for a total of 90 seconds while handing over to their teammate. And that is, it's not quite a lap, but it's only about 19 seconds shy of a lap at the current pace in these cars. And it must feel like an absolute eternity when you're the one having to change over. We have a little battle for position going on further back. This is another of the Imperiale Racing Lamborghinis. And just heading into view now, it looks like. And it is Raffaele Gianmaria who has taken over at the wheel of that car, which was being driven before by Jiatong Liang. So Gianmaria is in a fight for position with Alessandro Pierguidi in the Lucic Racing Ferrari. So Pierguidi got a little bit of a slipstream here, I think, and perhaps going to try and make a move coming into the Rettifilio. Does he give the feint and then back down the inside? They do. Oh, and a little bit of a tap as well. That move had more than a hint of British Touring Car Championship about it, I have to say. And Pierguidi staying behind for the time being. But now, the question is Raffaele Gianmaria going to have to give that position up having cut the chicane? And I would suggest that given that they only cut the chicane because of the contact from behind from a car that was really nowhere near to making a move, I don't think we're going to need to see a change of positions there. As Eddie Cheever hands his car over to Nicholas Nielsen in their first race in this series at Monza. Gianmaria holding on for the time being ahead of Alessandro Pierguidi. Meanwhile, we wait to see where the rest of the field filters out. We've got a few more drivers in the pits, and are any of them going to emerge ahead of Fran Reda? I tend to think not. I think we're going to see the Teo Martin driver hold on to the lead after this round of pit stops, not least because Reda is currently setting the quickest laps of anyone so far in this race. A 1:48.881 is a very quick lap, so we need over half a second, I think, quicker than anything we've seen so far. Here's a replay of that incident between Gianmaria and Alessandro Pierguidi, and as you can see, it was front bodywork against rear bodywork contact, which gives a reading on just how realistic that passing move was. Pierguidi clearly in the process of backing out of it when contact was made. Bernard Delez makes his way out of the pits, having been one of the last drivers to come in and make a pit stop. That's the Target Racing Lamborghini Huracan that Stefano Costatini started the race in, and a big battle on the brakes going on by the Imperiale Racing Lamborghini of Riccardo Agostini. And still the battle also going on between Alessandro Pierguidi and Raffaele Gianmaria over what is 11th place at the moment. The race clock ticks down, and as all those pits have been done, we've now only got 28 minutes of racing left, and the battle for outright honours is coming into focus, although not entirely yet, because we still have Tom Onslow-Cole and Andrzej Lewandowski at the very head of the field still to make their pit stops. Onslow-Cole 70 seconds ahead of Fran Rueda, who is the leader of the drivers who has already made their pit stop. So that gives you an idea where the Onslow-Cole Mercedes is going to re-emerge once it has been handed over to Valentin Pierberg, who will take it the rest of the way home. And we've had a warning to Alessandro Pierguidi, the Ferrari driver, for making contact with Raffaele Gianmaria in that incident we just saw the replay of. Esteban Guerrieri covering off on the inside as they come into the Ascari, holding on to 11th position at the moment. In fact, no, up into 10th position at the expense of Marcello Hahn. That's a change of position. So the Honda moving up at the expense of the Ferrari, the Mercedes rather. And in fact, now we have an all-Mercedes battle between Marcello Hahn and Thomas Jäger over what has become 11th position. And now here is our leader-elect, if you like, Fran Rueda in third position with a decent little lead over Andrea Montemini, 2.4 seconds back in the Ferrari. But still, Tom Onslow Cole and Andrzej Lewandowski determined to hang on until the last possible moments of the pit window, extending as far as possible. Oh, we got contact between the two Mercedes as we come down into the chicane. Marcelo Hahn and Thomas Jäger. Hahn holding on to that position for the time being. And as always in the International GT Open, it's once the pit stops are done that we start to see the big action going on the track, as the cars are now in something of a mixed up order and are now scrapping for position. So Tom Onslow Cole hits the pits, and here is that contact between the two Mercedes drivers, and that was as close as you like, probably a bit closer than Mercedes would like. Meanwhile, Stefano Gattuso is now at the wheel of the Ombra Racing Lamborghini Huracan and is trying to chase down Rick Breukers in another of the Lamborghinis ahead, the car that Riccardo Agostini started in this race, run by Imperiale Racing, and currently holding on to 5th position. Nicholas Nielsen in the car that Eddie Cheever started is now running in 7th place, so they've made up a bit of ground. But Alessandro Pierguidi in the other Ferrari, although those Ferraris changed place on the track before the pit stops began, the differing lengths of time in the pit stops means that the Pierguidi Michael Mack car has now slipped back behind again and is only in 9th position. So they have got some time to make up. And we will see over the remaining laps whether they can. Tom Onslow Cole having come in and handed over to Valentin Pierberg. We're now going to get a reading on where Pierberg will filter out with respect to the rest of the field, as Breukers and Gattuso are really going at it in their battle for 5th position at the moment. And not too far behind them then is Nicholas Nielsen, and there is the other Mercedes. Well, not content with having two Mercedes scrapping over position, the Onslow Cole Pierberg car has come out in the thick of the scrap, but it has been displaced for position by Nicolas Costa in the Lamborghini, with only one light showing following that damage earlier on. And was this yet more Mercedes on Mercedes fratricidal action? It looks like it may well have been. Marcelo Hahn holding off Pierberg there, and Nicolas Costa getting in between them in the Ferrari and making up another position. And the last of the drivers to come in and complete their mandatory changes is now being done as Giulio Borlenghi takes over at the wheel of another of the Lamborghinis. Borlenghi taking over from Andrzej Lewandowski in the Vincenzo Sospiri run car. So there is our race leader then, at least who will be our race leader once they come by and retake the position from Borlenghi, as my reading of the timing screen indicates they are going to do. Exactly where Borlenghi re-emerges is going to be an interesting point, although Valentin Pierberg, who was ahead, came out in 13th place, so it's likely to be around about there, depending on how much of a time penalty they've had to serve in the pits, and more warning flags for corner cutting, but we're getting that all over the track at the moment, as we often see at Monza. Unfortunately, the nature of the runoff being what it is, it does tend to cause a lot of this kind of incident. So all the driver changes have now been made, as you can see. And with 22 minutes and a bit left on the clock, it's now down to the drivers remaining in the cars to make as much as they can in terms of their position changes. So Fran Rueda leads 2.5 seconds ahead of Andrea Montemini. Rick Breukers is in 3rd place, and it's Stefano Gattuso. Nicholas Nielsen moves up into 5th place in the Ferrari, followed by Raffaele Giammaria and Alessandro Pierguidi, who we saw coming to blows earlier on. Esteban Guerrieri 8th in the Honda. Thomas Geiger is 9th, and Nicolas Costa rounds out your top 10 with 22 minutes to go. What, if anything, is anyone going to be able to do in terms of the positions over the final races? Or are Fran Rueda and Andres Saravia on course for their 3rd victory of the season? Andrea Montemini driving the car that Daniele Diamato started the race in. They are looking for their 2nd victory, and they are edging in, not by very much, it has to be said. Less than 1/10 of a second on the last lap But we've still got a decent way to go, and the drivers are likely to be getting stuck into traffic over the remaining 20-odd minutes of the race, providing, of course, we don't have any more safety car periods. And we do still have a battle for third place going on as well. In fact, this is one of the closest battles on the track at the moment. It is Rick Breukers in the Imperiale Racing Lamborghini ahead of Stefano Gattuso in the Ombra Racing Lamborghini. And it does seem as though these cars are set up somewhat differently, because we keep seeing Gattuso closing in Breukers on different parts of the track. And there goes Breukers holding off Gattuso, getting very, very close under braking. And another good little battle, as we've already seen, Gia Maria holding off Pierre Guidi in their battle for 6th place. Here they are. And Pierre Guidi's car sporting a bit of damage from their earlier contact. I wonder if Esteban Guerrieri behind in the Honda is going to be able to do much about them. He may... Well, there's certainly this trio of cars, in fact, Gia Maria, Pierre Guidi and Guerrieri are lapping up to half a second quicker than the 3 cars in front of them, which are Rick Breukers, Stefano Gattuso and Nicholas Nielsen. So we have a situation where the leaders, the lead pair, are very slightly closing on each other, and then the next 3 cars are being caught somewhat steadily by the 3 cars behind them. So we've potentially got a tight little battle, certainly for third place, looming towards the end of the race, and potentially a fight for overall honours as well. Now, what's going on further down in the running order? We've got a bit of argy-bargy going on between a couple of the Lamborghinis. In fact, fairly hefty contact there being made between Bernard Deles and one of the Daiko Lazarus Lamborghinis. In fact, it's the one being driven by Giuseppe Cipriani. That was the car on the inside, and has indeed seems to have caused a retirement for the Cipriani car. Has that left them with some suspension damage? And are we going to have to see our 4th safety car period of the race in order to sort that one out? Well, these cars heading towards the line now, and in particular, I would suggest Nicholas Nielsen will be hoping it doesn't, because he does seem to have a bit of a run on Stefano Gattuso in front. Or is that, sorry, that's Pierre Guidi on... Oh, and contact down at the hairpin. That was indeed Pierre Guidi trying to make his way past Raffaele Gia Maria. That's the second time we've seen contact between those 2 drivers. Now they're into double-waved yellow flags as they enter the Curva Grande, so they must back off and be prepared to potentially stop. Let's take a little look. They both really went in too hot, didn't they? And actually, there may not have been contact there. I don't think there was contact. I think there certainly could have been contact, and it certainly looked like there was from this angle, the one we saw originally, but the other angle says to me that perhaps there wasn't. Now, Fran Rueda, there is our race leader. He'll be fervently hoping that the marshals do not require another safety car in order to recover the car of Giuseppe Cipriani that is stopped at the side of the track. Because, of course, if he does, he will lose the 3-second lead he's built up over Andrea Montemini, particularly after having upped his pace on the previous lap. Because even though Andrea Montemini set his fastest lap of the race so far, Fran Rueda was able to pull out nearly 0.2 of a second over him. So it would seem that Rueda has got an answer for whatever Montemini has up his sleeve. Meanwhile, behind them, those gaps continuing to close up quite steadily. Between the group led by Raffaele Gia Maria, although of course Gia Maria and Pierre Guidi having gone off at the start of this lap, they may have lost some time, and that could all be to the benefit of 8th place Esteban Guerrieri. Good news, the Cipriani car has been cleared without the need for a safety car, so particularly good news if you happen to be our race leader, Fran Rueda. And if you are, then what are you doing? Stop listening to us and get back to focusing on the driving the car. But up at the sharp end, still this fight is going on between a couple of the Lamborghinis. The Rick Breukers Stefano Gattuso battle seems to have plenty of life left in it indeed. And Guerrieri getting a nice clean run out of the chicane. The same cannot be said for Alessandro Pierre Guidi ahead of him, who for the 2nd lap running has lost a fair bit of time down at the first chicane. And in fact, Pierre Guidi lost half a second there the last time around compared to the time that Guerrieri was setting, and that is why Guerrieri is now within striking distance of the Ferrari ahead of him. So Guerrieri looking good for a tilt at 7th place fairly soon. this battle is closing up nicely indeed. And once again, another of the drivers getting a little bit ragged at the exit of Lesmo 2. And of course, one of the characteristics of Monza is because the straights are so long, you make even a slight mistake at one of the corners. Most of the corners aren't asphalt runoff, or at least are bordered by gravel, so if you do drop a wheel wide, it does cost you quite a bit more time than if it was just an asphalt runoff. And with the straights being so long, that punishes you double. And that has been the problem that Raffaele Giammaria has been discovering, I think, over the last few laps. But of course, as is always the case, catching is one thing and passing is another. And when we were on board with Guerrieri earlier on, when he was trying to make a battle for position, it seemed like he didn't just quite have enough in hand at the end of the straight to be able to launch one up the inside. Well, that, of course, is when his teammate Bertrand Baguette was driving the car. Perhaps Guerrieri will find things a little bit different if he is in a position to take the fight to one of the cars ahead of him. Guerrieri now, though, really is tucked up quite closely behind Alessandro Pierguidi, who has got Raffaele Giammaria a similar distance in front of him. Now, a 5-second penalty for car number 27 for overtaking before the finishing line after the safety car. That was a potential problem that we flagged up earlier on. The penalty will go to Miguel Ramos, who's at the wheel of the car at the moment, though, of course, the infringement would have been committed by Ramos's teammate early on in the race. That was Fabrizio Crestani at the wheel of the Daiko Daiko Lazarus Lamborghini Huracan. So more problems for that team, because of course we've already seen Giuseppe Cipriani in the other car pull over and come to a stop. And meanwhile, the team managers at Target Racing have been summoned to the stewards over something to do with the Bernard Delaz Stefano Costatini car, which I don't think we have seen any evidence of. So we'll find out what that is about. Meanwhile, we've got under a quarter of an hour left to go in this race, and for the time being at the moment, it is looking fairly line astern. Montemini has begun to edge back towards Fran Rueda, and I wonder if Rueda might have hit a bit of traffic or had a bit of trouble or something, because Montemini has taken a decent chunk of time out of him over the last few laps. The gap had dropped to 2.1 seconds. It's now back out to 2.3. So perhaps that was Rueda losing a little bit of time behind some lapped traffic. And of course, the problem that the leader has is when they come around lapped cars for the first time, they're kind of waking them up or alerting them to the fact that they're being lapped, as now Esteban Guerrieri does go on the attack with Alessandro Pierguidi. Guidi completely cuts the corner while Guerrieri navigates the chicane properly. Now we'll have to see how the stewards feel about that one, but for my money, only one of those cars correctly went through the corner, and I think Pierguidi may even have not taken the correct route back onto the track as well. So I think Guerrieri has got good reason to feel aggrieved there, and that position would be his if Guerrieri had made all available attempts to stick to the track. So we'll see what might happen about that one. But that is the unfortunate thing with this kind of track layout sometimes, is you see a driver edging closer and closer towards a rival, makes a bid to make an overtaking move, but then that rival is just able to cut part of the track and keep the position. And I have to think that Guerrieri, if he was able to make the corner, then his rival Alessandro Pierguidi should have been able to as well. Let's get a replay of it. And it's not as if Pierguidi arrived there with all four wheels locked. And Guerrieri, I don't think, could possibly have left his braking a moment later. Perhaps it was simply the case that Pierguidi committed to braking later than he was going to, whatever would happen. But certainly that didn't work out for him if that was the case. So Pierguidi, 7th place for now. But as we say, we'll see what even the stewards have to say about it. There is Andres Sarabia keeping an eye on Fran Rueda's progress at the head of the field in the Teo Martin BMW. And of course, talking about cutting the corner and arguably gaining an advantage, we did see Sarabia do that earlier on in the race, but the stewards have said nothing about that. So perhaps they are taking a lenient stance on this kind of instance, in which case those drivers concerned don't have anything to worry about. Now, what about the battle for the lead? Do we have one? Well, Montemini is doing his level best to produce one, because he's again nicked a couple of tenths a second off Fran Rueda. The gap between them is 2.1 seconds. No one else is in the fight for the lead. The next car being driven by Rick Breukers, is over 10 seconds behind. So they are not in contention for the lead at the moment, unless Montemini and Rueda were to really get stuck into each other. But Nicholas Nielsen, at the moment, is in between two clumps of cars that are racing together quite hard, but not able to do anything about either of them. Juan Cruz Alvarez hits the pits. This is the much delayed other Teo Martin BMW M6, which we saw had problems earlier on in the race. And this appears to be some kind of penalty. I'm not entirely sure we've seen why. But at any rate, the car was not in a competitive position to begin with anyway. So Rick Breukers with Stefano Gattuso close behind, and then Nicholas Nielsen in the first of the Lusic Racing Ferraris, having a great introduction to the championship, but not as yet able to do anything about the cars ahead. So the race looking reasonably settled at the moment, although Montemini is still gradually edging his way closer towards our race leader, Fran Rueda, but not quite with him yet, but still with 10 minutes to go. It's possible we could just see some kind of action going on in the closing phase of the race, but there is Rick Breukers on his way to a podium finish for the time being. Well, always do keep in touch with us on social media at EF_Open on Twitter. If you have been doing, you may have seen that the 2019 calendar for the International GT Open has been published in provisional form, and there's some really exciting changes on the calendar for next year, not least the fact that all the races confirmed so far will be taking place on Formula One Grand Prix standard tracks, and that of course goes for the Euro Formula Open Series that supports it as well. Most of this year's circuits being retained. Great venues like Paul Ricard, Spa-Francorchamps, Silverstone, of course, will be back there again, and Monza potentially moving to hold the season finale next year in October after the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya. 7 races confirmed so far, all on international F1 standard circuits, including the addition of the Hockenheimring in May. That'll be a new race for the series in Germany, so one to look forward to as well. There is a further event to be confirmed for the Euro Formula drivers. That's not been announced yet, but the rest of the calendar looking very exciting indeed. And of course, there's still one more round coming for the International GT Open at the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya. So if you are watching somewhere that's not too warm at the moment and fancy a dose of Spanish sun in October, you could do far worse than bag yourself some tickets and watch some top racing action and also enjoy the Barcelona nightlife while you're there. It'll be a fine way to wrap up the International GT Open Championship. But Rick Breukers at the moment, well, he's had Stefano Gattuso staring at the back of his car pretty much since the pit stops, but Gattuso has not been able to do anything thus far. Nicholas Nielsen not getting any closer in the Ferrari behind. And Alessandro Pierguidi, who we're looking at, having by hook or by crook broken the attempt of Esteban Guerrieri to pass him a few laps ago, has now got Raffaele Giammaria on the defensive briefly as they approach the Variante della Roggia. Not able to pass for now, so we get a look at Thomas Jäger in the Mercedes SLS AMG run by Lechner Racing. And it is race over for Juan Cruz Alvarez, sorry to see, in the Teo Martin car, following whatever went wrong for his teammate Lorenzo Pereira de Vega on the first lap. But he is wheeled out of the way, and shortly we may be able to find out why before the end of the race. Of course, if we do, we'll bring you any further updates on that. Meanwhile, at the head of the field, we're not seeing it, but the battle between the front runners is not really closing up now. Rueda seems to be holding on to a comfortable 2-second lead over Andrea Montemini. So it's a battle between these cars that you're looking at, third down to around about 8th positions, that are the closest on the circuit at the moment. And Raffaele Giammaria is able, for the time being at least, to keep Alessandro Pierguidi behind. Pierguidi looking pretty quick, but not perhaps with the top speed advantage he needs at the end of the straights to be able to really throw one down the inside. And of course, the extra bit of drag from the bodywork he's damaged won't be helping matters either. If Stefano Gattuso is ever going to be able to make a pass for third place, I think he's going to have to spring it at the last moment on Rick Breukers, because he has been close, but not quite close enough yet. But this is perhaps closer than he's been at this point as they head towards the Della Roja. Meanwhile, our leaders are accelerating out of it. Fran Rueda moving ahead through the pit stops in the middle of the race, and Andrea Montemini in the former race leading car not able to do anything about it thus far. But it also bears pointing out that with Alessandro Pierguidi only down in 7th position at the moment, that is not going to contribute an awful lot to his or championship leader Michael Mach's points tallies at this stage. And Fran Rueda, who came into this race second in the championship on 77 points, is poised to strike with what will be his 3rd win of the year if he is able to take it. So that is looking encouraging indeed. In fact, it will be Fran Rueda's 2nd win. Sorry, no, I correct myself twice. I was correct the first time. It will indeed be his 3rd win if he's able to take it. It's been a very competitive championship so far, international GT so far this year. Lots and lots of different winners. And Fran Rueda and Andres Saravia in that BMW M6 have taken 2 of them. They won at Paul Ricard and they won at Spa-Francorchamps as well. And as it stands, they are on course to add another victory at Monza. With less than 5 minutes to go. Of course, there's still plenty that could happen, as we've seen already several times in this race. It only takes the slightest incident to bring the safety car out, and then life gets more difficult for the race leader indeed. And one of the Lamborghinis running a little bit wide. That was Raffaele Giammaria, and that's exactly what Alessandro Pierguidi wants to see, because that gives him a bit of a run coming out of the Rettifilio. And we've already seen that Pierguidi is not at all backward about coming forward in the braking zones and may well try to launch an attack here. And he's got Esteban Guerrieri poised to strike should something go wrong, and not making a move just yet, although Nicholas Nielsen kicking up a lot of dirt in the Ferrari, and one of the cars cutting the chicane and losing out. Oh, and forcibly coming through. Alessandro Pierguidi really leaning on, I believe that was Raffaele Giammaria, who made a mistake in the Variante della Roja. So Pierguidi takes advantage, as does Esteban Guerrieri. But Pierguidi, I'm not really sure that the sharp move across and the contact was necessary, particularly given that they'd already had contact noted earlier on in the race. And Guerrieri perhaps now sees an opportunity, having gained 1 place, to gain another one. Let's take a look at a replay of what happened. This is the aftermath, and you have to say, it did look to me as though Raffaele Giammaria was completely keeping his line, and in front of him, Pierguidi just moved over into the side of him. And that is the reaction on the Luzic Racing pit wall. We have several teams and drivers being summoned to the pits for a chat, being summoned to the stewards for a chat afterwards. Most of which appear to be running a little bit further down the order, but they include car number 28, which is Toby Sari and Giuseppe Cipriani in the Daiko Lazarus car, Jiatong Liang and Raffaele Giammaria's Imperiale Racing Lamborghini, and also Alessandro Pierguidi and Michael Mach for Luzic Racing. Well, we have seen a couple of incidents involving Pierguidi so far, so it may well be something to do with that. And meanwhile, we pick up the SPS Automotive Mercedes, now being driven by Valentin Pierberg, the car that Tom Onslow Cole started this race in. That is now running in 16th place. I think we just saw it had lost a bit of forward momentum, having been passed by Giulio Bolenghi. And now with 2 minutes left to go, we're going to have an all-Ferrari battle for 5th place between Nicholas Nielsen and Alessandro Pierguidi. Esteban Guerrieri in the Honda has dropped back from them a little bit. But you have to say, Nicholas Nielsen, as you can see from the pile on the left-hand side of your screen, piloting the only Pro-Am car inside the top 7. So that is an impressive achievement. The gap between the leaders is now down to 1.5 seconds. Fran Reda thus far has been able to respond to pretty much anything Andrea Montemini has had to throw at him. If Montemini's got anything left in the tank, now is the time to produce it, because time is running out. And actually Montemini quite a bit quicker through the middle part of the lap this time by. We're going to have, I think, this in fact, no, will be our final lap of the race. The gap has come down to just under 1.5 seconds. It's not going to be enough, I think, for Montemini to do anything about Fran Rueda, unless Rueda makes some kind of significant error over the remaining 5 and a bit kilometers of Monza. But he's into the Rettifido chicane and out of it with no problem on the final lap of the race. Montemini keeping an eye behind them. Rick Breukers is 14.6 seconds adrift, with Stefano Gattuso within a second of him. Then we have now got Alessandro Pierguidi up into 5th place, so there has been a change there between the 2 Ferraris. I wonder if there was a little bit of choreography involved in that one, because it will very much be to the aid of Pierguidi and Max championship chances if they move into 5th place ahead of the newcomers to the championship, Eddie Cheever and Nicholas Nielsen, who are now down to 6th. And Montemini really does seem to be pressing on the last couple of laps of the race, but I suspect it is going to prove to be too little too late to do anything about our race leader. And sure enough, Montemini, this lap, as on the previous lap, taking about 0.4 of a second out of Rueda in the middle sector. So he has really got a bit of a late charge on, and if he'd been able to start this a couple of laps earlier, or if the race were a couple of laps longer, perhaps he might have been able to take the battle to Rueda in the end. Or perhaps it's just a case of Rueda managing his car to the finishing line. And the finishing line is coming up on us very soon, because they're into the Parabolica and out of it. And Fran Rueda and Andres Saravia are going to score their 3rd victory of 2018, with less than a second in hand, though, over Andrea Montemini and Daniele Diamato. But it is a superb win for Teo Martin and their BMW M6. Excellent stuff from Fran Rueda and Andrea Saravia. Let's get the last of the drivers across the lines now. Montemini already home in 2nd. Rick Breukers claims 3rd place. And behind him, Stefano Gattuso, who spent a huge amount of the race putting him under pressure, trying to take that 3rd position, but to no avail. Alessandro Pierguidi made up a couple of places in the last few laps to claim 5th place, followed by Nicholas Nielsen, and then Esteban Guerrieri bringing the Honda NSX home in 7th place. Wrapping up the top 10, we have Raffaele Gianmaria, Thomas Jaeger, and Nicolas Costa. But that was a fine drive again by the Rueda Saravia BMW M6. We'll wait for the full update on the championship standings, but I suspect that's put them in a very strong position indeed, and potentially has moved them into the lead of the drivers' points. That may also depend, though, on whether the stewards have anything to say about some of the incidents that the Alessandro Pierguidi Michael Matt car was involved in, because they have been asked to appear before the stewards, so there could be something going on there. Always a bit of a disappointment when you see post-race changes in the order. I tend to think we won't see one, but nonetheless, it could well have a bearing on the championship, irrespective really of what happens to that car, because 1st place for Fran Rueda and Andres Saravia is going to give them a decent haul of points indeed. So there they are, heading back in, and Andrea Montemini has moved in front of them on his way back into the pits, and you can just see off there in the background the Audi A6 didn't make it to the end. So there is your full classification for the top 10. Fran Rueda and Andreas Saravia in the Teo Martin BMW M6 winning ahead of the RS Racing Ferrari of Diamato and Montemini. Imperiale Racing brought one of their Lamborghini Huracans home in 3rd place after a couple of the others were involved in incidents. Agostini and Breukers sharing the 3rd place car. Damiano Fioravanti and Stefano Gattuso chased them very, very hard and spent much of the rest of the racing staring at the back of them. The Luzic Racing Ferraris of Alessandro Pierguidi and Nicholas Nielsen swapped positions in the closing stages. Honda got their car home in 7th. And just looking outside the top 10, having run quite strongly early on, Valentin Pierberg and Tom Onslow Cole in their Mercedes ended up in 17th, quite a long way down for the partnership that won the previous race. And sure enough, there are our updated champ standings, and it is all tied between Andres Saravia, Fran Reda and Mikael Mack on 92 points at the head of the standings. Well, that sets up things very, very nicely for the last 3 races in the series. And of course, we'll be back again to do all this tomorrow, again with another qualifying session for the International GT Open drivers, followed by another slightly shorter race in the afternoon. So make sure you join us for that. A fine drive, though, by Fran Reda. There is Andrea Montemini having a quick debrief on his pursuit of Fran Reda and how close he came in the end to closing that gap down. It was up at about 3 seconds at one stage in the final stint, just 0.6 of a second when the checkered flag fell. And that is how close it was at the end of the race between Fran Reda and Andrea Montemini. And he must have been thinking just one more lap, and that one might have been his. So as we were saying, do make sure you join us again tomorrow for more from the International GT Open and the Euro Formula Open from Monza. We'll have another qualifying session and another race for each of those. And there may well be more to celebrate for those guys at Teo Martin. They've had a very competitive season so far. This, their 3rd win, which in a series where we've had a lot of different winners is a very respectable achievement indeed. In fact, no one else has won more than 3 races. Alessandro Pierguidi and Mikael Mack have won 3 as well. And that puts Fran Reda and his Teo Martin teammate Andres Saravia tied with them. So here are our top 3. Let's see if more race winners.
Fran Reda, Andres Saravia, well done. 3rd win of the season, and Fran, I think, is a little bit under the shock of post-race. So we start with Andres. How was it? First stint with a lot of safety cars, of course.
Yeah, our qualifying wasn't perfect, so we started from 12th. There's a lot of risk when you're starting in the middle of the pack, but turn 1 was, I got a little tap, and we managed to get out. Then all the safety cars, it was very close in turn 1 as well, but we managed it, and Fran did an amazing job after the start, after the pit stop.
Fran, it was about holding the position in front of Montermini. Apparently it was tough, huh?
Yeah, I mean, when we did the driver change, he told me, he was shouting, the car is very good, it's very balanced, so push like hell. And I just went in and pushed like hell, like he said. And I mean, when I went out, when I was in the straight line and I saw Montermini going out, I said, how, he's P1, we are here. And in the other lap, I tried to overtake in the outside, but I broke a bit too late, so it was kind of an accident. I didn't want to hit him, so I found a space in the inside, and fortunately it was an overtake, so. I don't know. I mean, I didn't expect a win, to be honest. It's just a surprise, really.
Well done. And this reopens completely the championship. I think there is a tie in points at the top. So everything is still to be decided tomorrow and in Barcelona. Well done, guys.
Thank you.
Let's take a look back at the best of that one then, as it was D'Amato who led the field down at the start, but it was to prove to be a bit of a lively start to proceedings as Loris Spinelli got into the back of one of the Imperiale Racing Lamborghinis, knocking Riccardo Agostini into a spin. And during the opening phase of the race, we saw a total of 3 safety car periods due to various different problems, but moving his way forward, Bertrand Baguette in the new Honda NSX. Unfortunately, though, we lost from proceedings earlier on. Oliver Wilkinson in the Audi R8 spun out down at the Ascari chicane and was not to resume. moving their way to the front. Andres Saravia fighting their way up from a fairly lowly starting position, but more action going on down at Ascari. You got your money's for worth if that was where you got your ticket for this weekend. But what a disappointing race for Giovanni Venturini. Repeated problems in that Imperiale Racing Lamborghini Huracan, eventually forcing him to pull over. A bit of an eventful one also for Jiatong Liang and Raffaele Giammaria. Contact indeed between Alessandro Pierguidi in the Ferrari and Giammaria. And Pierguidi was eventually able to make his way by, but that wasn't the only time it got physical. After the pit stops, Fran Rueda hit the front and, as you heard, surprised himself with his overtake on Andrea Montemini for the win. And although Montemini closed in the final stage of the race, it was Rueda who took the victory by just 0.6 of a second. So Fran Rueda and Andres Saravia on the top step of the podium once again in 2018. Here's our national anthem for the race winners. Victorious then for the third time this year for the Teo Martin squad, and we're going to start handing out the silverware. First of all, for the drivers who finished in third place, that's Rick Breukers and Riccardo Agostini. Despite that contact at the start of the race, they fought their way back very well indeed, and you have to say Breukers in particular weathered an awful lot of pressure in the closing stage of the race to hold on to that third position. Second place for Andrea Montemini and his teammate in the Ferrari. Daniele Diamato started from pole position, but outrun for the victory by those two, Fran Rueda and Andres Saravia. Well, that, as we've said, sets things up very tightly indeed between Fran Rueda, Andres Saravia and Mikael Mack. At the top of the championship standings, as you've just seen, it is all tied. It is looking very exciting indeed in the International GT Open Championship, and we'll be back for more of it again tomorrow from Monza. So make sure you join us again then. We'll see you soon. We've had the podium for the overall finishers, and next up at Monza will be the podium for the Pro-Am category. That was led by the Ferrari of Nicholas Nielsen and Eddie Cheever III on their debut. Lusick Racing bringing that entry for the third pair of drivers this weekend, and superb job they did as well. They finished 6th place in the overall classification. There was a late switch in position between them and the sister Lusick Racing Ferrari of Alessandro Pierguidi, which I don't think we saw at the time because we were looking at another battle somewhere else on the track. But nonetheless, that didn't change their position at the top of the Pro-Am category, and here they come. So up at the top of the Pro-Am podium is Eddie Cheever III and Nicholas Nielsen in the Lusick Racing Ferrari, and we're going to start to hand out the trophies as well. Second place in the Pro-Am classification was Raffaele Giammaria and Jiatong Liang in the Imperiale Racing Lamborghini Huracan. They're on the, there they are receiving their podium prizes at the moment. And third in the Pro-Am classification, Thomas Jäger and Mario Placiuta in the Lechner Racing Mercedes SLS AMG. So the drivers pose for the traditional photographs at the end of this one, and they get a spot of the bubbly as well. And now it's the usual race to get the bottles opened first, and while the Ferrari pair may have come out ahead in the race, it was their rivals in the Lamborghini who were first to pop the cork at the top of the podium, so well done to them. I'm sure they've not had that much practice in the International GT Open because they're racing here for the first time this weekend, but surely elsewhere they will have done. So well done to all our drivers in the Pro-Am category. The final podium ceremony of the day then will of course be for the amateur class. And the first of the all amateur entries home was in 12th position, and that was Guillaume Salas and Macho Basso in the Theo Martin BMW M6 with about 14 seconds actually in hand over the next amateur car, which was Giulio Borlenghi at the end of the race. In the car that was shared with Andrzej Lewandowski, the Vincenzo Sospiri Racing Lamborghini Huracan, which came home 14th in the overall classification. And already on the podium there, third in the amateur classification was the HTP Motorsport MS Racing Mercedes SLS AMG of Martin Conrad and Alexander Hrachwiner. And there they are on the podium already. And so out come Guillaume Salas and Macho Basso to collect their trophies as well. And you have to say, you know, full credit to all the drivers in the amateur class who made it home with no problems, because it's particularly difficult with all those safety car restarts and being racing in the middle of the pack. We saw a lot of incidents, and merely avoiding trouble is a decent performance indeed. And they're in the thick of it all the way. And of course, you're racing against drivers who've got other races to think about. So it's never easy in that situation. But of course, that just makes it a particularly good weekend for Theo Martin. So full congratulations to them and all the winning drivers today. We'll be back again tomorrow for more from the International GT Open. Join us tomorrow morning for qualifying and the race from Monza. Until then, bye for now.